I guess there's nothing wrong with starting a little early.
We're recording.
1 minute too. So, I'm Manuel Goldstein, editor of 2600 Magazine, and this particular panel is about cybersquatting and freedom of speech. Between me and Andy here, who's on the board of ICANN, we have quite a few stories to tell. We'd like to have as much back and forth as possible too, since I'm sure there are all kinds of people here with horror stories and questions and things like that. Being with Hacker Magazine, of course, we're always encountering speech issues. And anyone who's on the internet these days encounters speech issues on a daily basis. Sometimes they don't even know they are. Things you can and cannot say, things you can and cannot do or link to or put on your web page. Interesting words have sprung into existence, mostly created by the media, cybersquatting being one of them. When people think of cyber squatters, they think of, well, I guess they think of hackers as always. They think of evil people doing bad things to the systems and keeping the rightful owners out wherever they may be. We've been accused of cyber squatting on more than a few occasions. Once, there was a phone company called Verizon back in the States, massive phone company that covers all of the eastern United States. And they're fairly new. They came about as a merger between two other huge phone companies known as Bell Atlantic and I think, I'm not sure what the other one was, GTE possibly. AirTouch? Well, AirTouch wasn't the big one, but yeah, they merged all kinds of different companies. 9X, Neo Telephone, they all merged together, so there's one big, huge company now. And when they did this, they took a whole number of sites. They took hundreds, if not thousands of sites. Domain names. They registered them. In fact, we printed them once to show how many different sites they decided to take. They didn't stop at just the average ones like Verizon.com, VerizonPhones.com, Verizon Payphone, or whatever. They went a little further than that. They decided to take VerizonSucks.com and Verizon Terrible.com, various other permutations on that, so that no one else would take those sites. The logic of having a website that says you suck escapes me, because it seems to me that you're confirming the fact that you suck if you take it yourself, which is why we didn't take 2600sucks.com, somebody else did. So we couldn't take VerizonSucks.com. And the thing is, we had been working with phone companies ever since we began publishing the magazine, and before that, in fact. And the phone company keeps changing its name. You have to wonder why they keep changing their name. When we started, it was all part of the Bell system, one big monopoly. And then it broke up into various little pieces. Our piece was New York Telephone, and then that turned into 9X, and that turned into Bell Atlantic, and that turned into Verizon. So it's all one big monopoly again on the east coast of the United States. So even though Verizon was fairly new at the time, we knew they were going to suck at some point. Because having dealt with phone companies, we just kind of know these things. But we were at an impasse because we couldn't get VerizonSucks.com to run our website on. And we decided, okay, we can outwit these people, so we got VerizonReallySucks.com. And they didn't think that was very funny. They threatened us with a lawsuit based on cyber squatting. They accused us of cyber squatting. Now, I think actually they're the ones who are cyber squatting. If they own a site called VerizonSucks.com, they don't do anything with it. They don't show how Verizon sucks. Then they are in fact cyber squatting. And we wanted to go to ICANN, or WIPO actually, and complain about this. But they complained first, and we had to deal with them. So they told us that VerizonReallySucks.com was illegal for us to have. And we had to wonder, how many words were they planning on taking, I mean, every single critical word in the English dictionary, maybe some foreign dictionaries as well, followed by, really, or really, really, or every single possible permutation that they'd quickly go out of business. So we felt it was in their interest not to pursue this. We had to step in for some reason. So of course, we made a big news story about this and got lots of publicity. In fact, we even started the site. We connected to the we actually do have a site on VerizonReallySucks.com. And actually, it links to another site called VerizonEatsPoop.com. As you can tell, was a lot of sentiment out there against Verizon. And basically what that turned into was kind of a watchdog site that employees and customers would post to with all kinds of information. At one point, Verizon went on strike, and that was a place for strike information to get out. Other times people have trouble getting DSL or ISDN installed, and they post complaints there. So there is a valid purpose for sites that criticize corporate names. And I guess what's really interesting about that is that Verizon themselves actually recognized it after a time, after some bad publicity. They said in a news story that they're not going to pursue this, and they realized that it was a case of freedom of speech, and that I guess they were sorry they ever started it in the first place. Other companies are reasonable. Some of them are suing us, and we've been through all kinds of different threats with different companies for registering names that they claim is either not our entitlement under freedom of speech, or that we are in fact taking their name, their trademark, and engaged in trademark infringement and cybersquatting. I think you can find all kinds of instances of cybersquatting on the net that don't involve individuals, and involve things like monopolistic control of the net. For instance, the most recent one, how many of you are aware of the .info.biz controversy that's going on right now? Yeah, that's the new top-level domains, some of the new top-level domains. Well, of course, the big question is, well, how do we ensure that the rightful owners get the new top-level domains? How do we ensure that they get the proper ownership, and that somebody who doesn't have the right to Verizon.biz or Verizon.info gets it? They had a rather complex system where you have to register in a sunrise period and basically reserve the name in advance. That's all fine and good, except that it led to a lot of fraud. It led to a lot of companies or people registering common names, like flower or sunshine or sky or you name it, and claiming that they had a trademark on those particular names. So how do you contest something like this? Well, the only way that you can contest it is to pay a $300 fee and take that to some kind of arbitration, and then the domain gets put back into the pool. Now, to me, that sounds a lot like cybersquatting, but that is how the registrars are running it now. They basically say, okay, you say you have a trademark, we believe you, and now that site is yours, and anybody who wants to contest that must pay $300 just to contest it, not to get the site, just to contest it. And if they win, the site gets put back into the pool, and then somebody else can do the exact same thing, and we make lots of money, and it just goes on forever. So it's not a clear instance. Of course, there are people out there who are sleazebags, and they register sites with company names, and they hold them hostage. In fact, we almost had that happen to us. Had an interesting situation with somebody trying to hijack 2600.com last year and send it over to register.com. And they did. They actually succeeded in doing that, but we caught it. And we talked to register.com. The interesting thing, we actually talked to register.com. We sent them an email. We got email back from a human being. We said they were very sorry this happened, and they were making sure it went back to NSI. And we sent the mail back saying thank you. And if we ever decide to go over to register.com, it would be because you actually personally replied to us, and that makes a big difference. And they were very pleased with that. NSI, of course, we just got automated things back from them. And the automated things indicated that, in fact, the site did go back. The problem started when we tried to renew our domain. It seemed that we'd fallen into some sort of a black hole where we were there and we weren't there at the same time. Our site was registered under NSI, but it wasn't billed under NSI. So when the billing time came, we couldn't pay for our domain. We thought, okay, maybe this is a good deal, where we have kind of a free domain, but in any event, it's going to be something interesting if it gets to the point where the domain expires. Well, it got to that point, the domain expired, and suddenly our domain was out in the open, and immediately was grabbed up by somebody, I don't know who grabs domain names. There are all kinds of automated processes that do that. It just suddenly was owned by somebody in Virginia, and of course that caused us all kinds of pain, because not only would our website be going to the wrong place, but all of our email, every single user in our system, everything would be going to somebody else. And at that point we realized how vulnerable somebody can be if they're if their domain is taken over by somebody else. And that's the real danger of cyber squatting. It's a word I really hate, because I hate anything with the word cyber in it. But it's what the media and the government have come up with, so I guess it's a recognizable phrase. Fortunately, we were able to find one of the 3 people at NSI who actually understands how the system works, and they were able to fix it, get back for us. But this kind of thing happens a lot, where names are taken over by people who hold them hostage, who want to sell them. So we've had our run-ins. We've had our run-ins with freedom of speech and with cyber squatting and all kinds of evil things in the world of the internet. Andy certainly knows a lot more about how it really works. Having gotten himself elected to ICANN, I'm not sure if he regrets that now. But I'll turn it over to Andy now.
So I mean, we have not very much time here, so I'd like to give you a short picture of what ICANN is and how it handles these issues, to let some spaces for your maybe specific questions on how things go. So ICANN is an institution that understands themselves as a pure technical administrative body on internet policies. ICANN's structure is based on so-called supporting organizations. So, I mean, ICANN is a Californian-based company. I would have to explain that's running the IANA functions, so the Internet Authority for Names Assigning, under a construction made by the United States government. And in the here we talked about domain name issues, so we have this so-called domain name supporting organization. And you might see that in this pure technical administrative body, we have a very strange thing, and that's called the intellectual property constituency. So, I mean, that's nothing technical, of course, that's nothing administrative, that's something political. And it means the WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization, other organizations caring about the so-called rights of the trademark owners that do take place in the ICANN process, and they annoy ICANN a lot. So ICANN gives them what they want. For example, the so-called sunrise period for the introduction of new top-level domains. That means that only trademark holders get the first 150 days domain name. So I try to give you a short picture and come to some issues. First, my going to the ICANN board was following Mr. Leon Gold's statement in the process I watched against 2600, where on the very first day he said chaos will reign. So I thought that's a good idea, and try to win there. So I'm not going to tell much about his computer club here. So ICANN is based still in California, and it's still based on the so-called dominant authority of the United States government Department of Commerce. That means that the most important decisions ICANN makes, for example, adding new domains, top-level domains, or changing things, or doing anything, has to be accepted by the United States government Department of Commerce, which means ICANN is not directly influenced by the United States government, but it does everything to not become into any problems with the Department of Commerce, which of course, as the Department of Commerce, more is interested in trademark issues than an internet users or freedom of speech issues or anything like that. So, the technical situation of the domain name system, we had a workshop before that, just to make it very short. It's a very centralistic hierarchic system. It's all about the so-called root zone file, where the top-level domains are technically attached and then show up where the servers are standing that run these top-level domains. So as well as the country code of top-level domains as the generic top-level domain. And for historical reason, following the RFC 1591, we have this .com.org.net run by Network Solutions VeriSign company. And of course, they have a very great interest in not expanding the namespace to too many generic top-level domains, and to have very restricted policies on the CC/TLD side. Because, for example, France is a country which does not allow its citizens to have a direct domain under .fr, as well as the Netherlands here do not. You have to be a company, and you have to have a registered paper of your company, and then you can have a direct name. You can get as a French citizen a domain under, for example, .com.fr or your family name and then .main.fr and so on, but it makes things more complicated, and that means people first go the more easy way and go to .com.org.net, which is $1 million business every day anyway. But this also means that the ICANN process of expanding the namespace, we had in the year 2000, there were 43 proposals for new namespaces. For example, also Paul Gehring, running name.space in New York, wanted to have, and he even paid his $50,000 fee to have .sox. He was not officially rejected for not mentioning the trademark issues as ICANN would have liked it, but it was more or less obvious that he was not in the mainstream ICANN wanted to people to act. So there is meanwhile, and that might be something we will have to discuss in an own workshop, there's of course alternative people or alternative so-called group name service. So the frustration of the ICANN process is meanwhile formed into a business. For example, at new.net, you can have 20 or 30 of new top-level domains there. But if these the concept does really work out, if we don't have conflicts, if two of the same top-level domains with the same name are in an ICANN root name server or in another root name server, and the question if ISPs play the game with alternate roots, which is the most important question, because if we open here .hacker, let's say, and we have our own root name service, that's fine for us, because we might all know how to tell our computer what DNS to use. But to have a domain which can be also used by so-called normal users or whatever, we would have the ISPs playing with us. And currently, they more seem to like to play the ICANN game. ICANN's legitimation, I can talk more about that now. To make it very short, I mean, ICANN was made by the Department of Commerce by the United States government. Of course, you could ask who did legitimate the United States government to do so. No one did really. ICANN currently is one of the 5 elected directors through the so-called at-large process, which means the other ones are just there by self-electing through the supporting organizations which are formed in that so much vote. I just want to concentrate here a little bit on some issues. So we do not only, if we look at this term cybersquatting, for example. Cybersquatting is normally a propaganda term of the intellectual property industry for naming those who register a trademark as a domain name to sell it then to the company who uses that. So a trademark system is a system normally based on so-called classes of services or goods. So for example, if Coca-Cola is having this thing to drink, they have this name, and it's, I mean, there's some reason to not buy something with Coca-Cola written on it, and then you have maybe a fuel in it or whatever. I mean, there's some reason to have something like a trademark system. But in the namespace of the internet, we don't have these products or classes. We only have .com, which means every name is in a way created equal. So and also where we have not a worldwide intellectual property namespace system, which is very much different. It might be that I think of a nice name to have as a business in Germany. No one uses that name for business in Germany. I choose it and get blah blah.com. That's an Egypt company who makes a car or a toaster or anything with that name, and they have a trademark entry, which means under the current ICANN procedure, I lose my domain name. So this is called caused by the so-called UDRP. ICANN has formed a procedure for the disputes in the domain name system. The UDRP is the Uniform Domain Name Dispute Resolution Policy, which means that there is, because of the several different jurisdictions, and the problem that in some cases, if people have registered, if I, as a German, the same example, have a domain name under .com and I have trouble with an Egypt company, then we have the German legal system, we have the American legal system, because .com is based in a database which is in the United States, and we have this Egypt company. You could guess that if this comes to lawsuit, It will take hours, months, years, whatever. It will cost everyone a lot of money. And that's why I thought it's a good idea to get that away from the lawsuit and get to so-called procedures being run on own circles to fix the problem. These circles are to choose by those who start the UDRP process. So if anyone thinks that his name is abused, he will go to, not to ICANN, but to those who he wants the problem to solve. There are 4 accredited solving parties for this. One of them is the World Intellectual Property Organization, and of course that is one most of the people choose, because those who go to ICANN are most of the time trademark holders and not hackers or anyone else. So one of the key questions, which is of course not really answered by ICANN, but ICANN can imagine it in a way that if Eric here has fuckgeneralmotors.com or fuckanything.com, that using trademarks within just a domain name already is abused or is an abuse under the UDRP. So that's one of the key problems, that ICANN does not see that there is, whatever free speech issues that don't have anything to do with the trademark system. So to talk about the name of the company under the name of the company. Also, when this public domain extension process was run, the unions originally wanted .workers. They wanted to have whatever Coca-Cola.workers to find information about how Coca-Cola treats its workers under the name of the company they are working for, so that you can inform yourself easily about not only a product but also where it comes from and how the people are treated to do that. And that was also one of the things that were not even in the proposals, because the intellectual property mafia, or however we call it, seems to be quite near to the lawyers of ICANN, which means some things don't even show up because they're killed within the process of informal consultation. But we also have not only this intellectual property stuff, we have also a problem through technical structure of the domain name system. For example, we had the case of voteauction.com, which was an Austrian-based artist project while the American presidential election was running. When this presidential election became already a little bit absurd and people asked if America would be able to elect its president in some kind of a democratic way or whatever, they thought on making it even more absurd, and they started an auction on a server based in Vienna, allowing American citizens to put their vote for auction, so to just give it to those who would pay the most money and then elect those who would pay the most money. In Vienna's and in Austria's law, this is a complete legal action. There's no law against it. A lawsuit in Minnesota, or let's say the politicians in Minnesota thought this is not compatible with the American legal system and started a lawsuit. And it was not even a lawsuit that was against those artists in Austria. They didn't even know of it. The only thing they knew is that their domain name didn't work out. So by an by an immediate court action, I think it will be the right English term. It was their domain name was closed down by Network Solutions, because of the computer that was holding the entry, the record voteauction.com was in Minnesota. So, and that's the reason. So we could say American law did here apply to Austria, which is Europe, which is strange enough. So that's one of the key problems we have with the domain name system, where even those countries who make it hard for their citizens to get the domain name entry under the CCTLD database in its own country, bring those people to the American database system, which not only gives money to the companies running it, so .com.org.net currently, but also brings this political abuse option. So of course, we could discuss now more the other problems, because at the end of the day, of course, it's, if we talk about freedom of speech, and let's say the United States government might one day get into contact with a whole country like China or like India, whatever, in the technical ability, they would have the chance to just get their CCTLD entry in the root zone file away or change, which means internet would still work in that country, but any communication service based on the DNS records, on the DNS record, email or whatever, to India or to China wouldn't work anymore. And this, of course, is one of the, let's say, things where we could say DNS might be the single point of failure of the internet, or other way around, because ICANN is an institution which tries, in a way, to get to power, to establish some power, some global power through these ways. So normally the CCTLD are allowed to do their own policies. So the UDRP is only for the so-called generic top-level domains, so com.org, and now for the new .info.biz and so on. The CCTLD databases can be run under whatever policy they want. So normally they wouldn't even have to mention trademark issues or anything like that. What happened here is that ICANN originally wanted some money from all the CCTLDs for running the root name service, which distribute the root zone file information down to the ISPs on this planet. And they sent out some bills, some invoices to the CCTLD managers. And the CCTLD manager said, wait a moment, if you want money from us, then we want a contract. We want something where we pay for. I mean, we at least have to know that, and we have to define that. And they wanted more stability at some of the root name servers. They wanted more scalability in those root name servers and several other things. And I can say, okay, that's fine, just send us your list. The CCTLD managers did that, and then I can send out a proposal for a contract telling the CCTLDs next to everything they had arranged before that they would have to bring a piece of paper of their national government that says that the CCTLD registry is run by order, by acceptance, or at least by tolerance of the national government the CCTLD is sitting on. So this means if we look, for example, in Germany in this case, this would mean the German parliament or the German government was us, not some institution of the German government, but officially the German government. And if officially the German government has to do anything, this has to be discussed in parliament. So we would have 650 members of parliament discussing about if the DENIC, which currently runs the CCTLD.de, is allowed to run .de and under what discussion and under what policies, of course. Because if you think about members of parliament talking about the internet, you have all those guys sitting there thinking, oh, internet, isn't that this stuff with child pornography, Nazi propaganda, and those hacker bunches and whatever? And so we could get to even more restrictive policies, because of course lots of governments through this ICANN ladder, first time heard of, they have a chance of controlling the internet, at least in their country. So, and this is a little bit showing up the ICANN power game. On one hand side, they want to get to this trilateral thing, so contracts to the CCTLDs, contracts to the national governments, and so between ICANN and the national governments also. On the other hand side, still, this means they tell the national governments, you might have here something to regulate and to use your power. On the other hand side, ICANN is on behalf of the United States government in this stuff, which means countries might be suitable, let's say Iraq or whatever, with what the United States government might. It's the United States government that controls the root zone file. So this is, if you want, cybersquatting or freedom of speech in the big picture. So the misuse this not only has to do with, let's say, the intellectual property issues. So yeah, that's maybe this. There is, of course, other issues we could talk about, but I think it's better to open now to your specific questions, watching the time we have.
Well, Andy, I actually have a question. How did ICANN get all this power? Where did they come from? I mean, I remember back in the early days, there was this level of bureaucracy and
So it all
control.
started with someone called John Postel. John Postel was one of those more or less old-style hippies that started to develop RFCs and internet functions. And in the early days, John Postel was running his one-man show, running this IANA, so this Internet Authority for Name Society. That was just meaning he had one file, host.txt or whatever, where he said, so someone called him up and said, we here in Germany, we want to start a CCTLD, and he said, okay, what's your IP number? And then he put that in his file, and that was the whole procedure. Same was, there was some RFC, like, so in the IFTF, there was a discussion on how to create something for commercial and for non-commercial institutions. So this RFC 1591, where all the DNS is based on, and so .com, .org, .net were more or less were created. Also, John Postel was then giving the port numbers for communication services within the TCP/IP protocol, and was thinking about policies which are now run by the rights on how to give people IP addresses. When the internet became increasingly more important for business and was mentioned all on the planet, people found out that this one man was responsible for the whole internet's domain name main resources. And industrial leaders and politicians talked in congresses about this man who was most of the times of the year not even wearing shoes and wasn't wearing any suits and wasn't so much compatible with the structure they had thought the internet would look like. And so they discussed to build an international treaty organization originally based at the United Nations to take care of these resources in the international democratic but also bureaucratic field those institutions have. The United States government didn't like the idea that the United Nations were doing this stuff because the United States seems to be, or the United Nations seems to be one of those institutions where the United States government has not so much influence as in most of the other so-called international organizations. And so they more or less started to form ICANN by a white paper, green paper process, and gave something to the other governments that they didn't feel completely outside, totally government advisory committee. So it means the other countries which applied for the United Nations to do this, they couldn't kick them completely out, but they found a working circle where the other governments would have a feeling to be within the process. So it's like if you go to politics, you will often find yourself sitting in working groups, and you have lots of papers to discuss and lots of procedures to follow on and lots of things to vote on. But at the end of the day, everything is very unimportant what you do because the decision is completely made somewhere else. And that's how you can think of the government advisory committee also. So the governments are sitting there, and of course I can give them very good feeling that they're inside the process, but it's not really. And to end this short story, John Postel preferred to die in October of 1998 when ICANN was almost formed. His own lawyer called Joe Sims, who's now still ICANN lawyer, was at that time building up this institution, and John Postel got a heart attack by whatever kind of reason, and he's no more there. So, I mean, if all of this was happening today, is in the sense of John Postel, there's another question, but okay, just to answer your...
What strikes me as amazing, though, is that we have a situation where TLDs, top-level domains, are pretty much allocated as if they were finite resources, as if they were something that have to be allocated because we're going to run out of them. In actuality, correct me if I'm wrong, we could have thousands of top-level domains for every single category we could possibly imagine, and we wouldn't have all these control issues then. So because we're a relatively small group of people saying, no, you must only have it this way, we will allocate top-level domains as we see fit. We will ignore the ones that we don't see fit, and we'll accept the $50,000 application fee, but we'll deny them.
You have to see two things to that. One is, you said very right, and that's very obvious, that if you have a lot of top-level domains, it's going to be very hard to have that much level of control you have right now. Because, for example, if someone wants to start up a new top-level domain under ICANN policies, he will have to sign a contract with ICANN, accepting trademarks, having the sunrise period, and so on and so on. If he doesn't do that, he will not get this top-level domain. It will be taken away from him. So that's a very clear instrumental of power. The other thing is that as most of the capitalistic system is based on making things unavailable. So if for example, I mean, you see food being destroyed just because to let the prices be on a special level, and if we would have lots of namespaces, it would not be justified to take $60 or whatever for a top-level domain, which is just a fucking database entry per year. And I mean, that's how network solutions grow up so much. And today, my feeling is a little bit that network solutions really took over part of the control of the ICANN process. So for example, we have now the large study committee, which is a group that shall find out how the future setting up of the ICANN board of directors shall be run by elections or not, or in what kind of participation ways there will be for users. They have a meeting on Monday now in California, and where is that meeting? At the Network Solutions Convention Center. Okay. So you really ask yourself, what's going on here? So,
you guys remember when it used to be free to register domain names? Can you imagine if we knew what we do now then, we could register all kinds of things, and boy, they'd really be after us then. I guess we'll open up to some questions. I was asked, for the benefit of the people who are listening, streaming, either shout your question and we will repeat it, or walk up to the microphone there that's facing the audience and say it there, and we don't have to repeat it. Or if nobody has any questions, I think I'll go home.
Yeah. So maybe there's cases where you want to.
A question about domain names. I have a litigation with different company that have the company from Italy, and in Italy we have a special law which is called law facility that was declared in 2 weeks, and all the Italian internet community, starting from the provider, etc., said this is an abuse because the Italian government said that the Chamber of Commerce will have to decide if the .it is valid rather than our .it. I have a litigation with a different company because we have the name quite similar. They are .org and we are something else, .com and .it. This kind of litigation, I got a letter from a lawyer. This litigation will be ruled by the Italian Chamber of Commerce or by the ICANN, because they expect the ICANN, their org against the .com. It is not dependent of the state we are in this moment. I hope this. As we are a small startup company, is it an idea, for instance, to suggest this to our finance department? So actually, they are asking us something wrong, and then they will sponsorize us for their mistake.
In a way, first you can always go to your local government and ask them for things when things go wrong, but you also might see the long-term effect that your national government might come on strange ideas with this. So,
and .org with the .com, it's managed by ICANN.
No, I mean, .org and .net is managed by Network Solutions, and even there has been some long and complicated procedure in the very much past that Network Solutions will give away part of its power on .org and .net for the sake of having then .com complete under their control. Currently, there's a so-called separation between registry and registrar, but anyhow, at the end of the day, That's databases which are located in the United States, and which mean the United States legal system applies. And I'm not sure I have to comment what I like about the United States legal system, starting with the DMCA and all that shit.
Well, the United States legal system has managed to figure out ways of suing people in other countries from state courts, which I think is an amazing achievement. I don't know how they expect to enforce it. But with us in charge of certain key databases, it has to make you a little bit apprehensive as to just what we would do in a crisis situation. Go ahead. If you could step up to the microphone, make it easier.
Just to prolong your reflection on that, are there any ideas actually on the way to set up something like exactly the same thing, running a TLD, doing it the right way, which means for free or for nearly free, and in a way that it still can gain wide acceptance, so that there is not the problem that all the DNS, of course, even run by standard small ISPs would use it.
So I mean, namespace and Bulgarian are trying for a very much long time to have an alternative root server system. So it's not one computer only. It's 10 computers which exchange this and distribute the database entries, and most of his domains are for free. I mean, it's also, I mean, of course, he tries to run this as a business in the meaning of it's free to get more ISPs playing with it and so on, and you can even suggest new ones and then you will add them to his list. ICANN now has had a discussion because of New.net, because New.net was with a little bit more venture capital trying to do this in a little bit more professional manner, so marketing, and starting with those who were rejected from the ICANN process, where we have huge companies also who were rejected just because of ICANN's control mission to just add a very small number of top-level domains and have this proof of concept, they call. What's happening here is the ICANN tries to, of course, be the only power by saying you're not allowed to have anyone you believe in next to us, just like the Christian church did or whatever it did. And by having a paper out called a unique root name space for the internet or whatever, which means that they don't want other alternate root systems because they draw very big pictures on the problems that could rise if emails go to the wrong person just because the domain name district is different in alternate roots and ISPs run the wrong root name server. So of course what we need here to have peaceful coexistence, also if we think about building our own namespaces, is how to get this. And there is the Open Root Name Server Confederation, open-src.org if I remember right, who tries to arrange this peaceful coexistence, but that's of course based on first come, first served in a way. So if you think about a new top-level domain, that's great for you, and you mail it to the Open Root Name Server Confederation, and you have it. But I mean, this is the problem a little bit we have on the other hand side. So this UDRP and the process of using trademarks was also the try to get away from this first come, first served, because first come, first served also has its disadvantages and possibilities of abuse. So the only thing that might really help us is a lot of namespaces with, for example, product categories where you then don't have the problems registering one name that is used for a car and then you can report it.
Is it possible to have a lot of namespaces where they simply agree not to duplicate?
I mean, in theory, of course, the root zone file is just a file, like a file on your computer. It's just a list of the 200, 300 ccTLDs and just few gTLDs. So, I mean, technically, technically that's not the problem. The question is the policy. And what policies are it? It's not a technical problem, it's a policy question. How do we get to a situation where we are satisfied with different namespaces and everyone wants to run this or that, and then we have this conflict. So that's the problem.
Questions? Okay, start with another thing.
A couple of months ago, I've been to the ICANN meeting in Stockholm. I spoke to a lady, called Rainbow Girl. She was from China. Her name was not really Rainbow Girl, but much more difficult to pronounce. And she said, just call me like that. She has a couple of IP addresses where the DNS of China is running on. They want to change that into a different IP address in the root server file. It takes now already 9 or 10 months to be able, ICANN, to change that type of information. Why is that? Is there a lot of pressure for network solutions not to deal with CCTLEs, or is it any other reason?
You're talking about international domain?
No, the primary, secondary, and root servers of different countries cannot be changed very easily, even if the countries are fully supporting it. Why is that?
That also has to do with that China applied for its own root name server. Because, I mean, we can say anything bad about ICANN, and most of it is completely right. But ICANN tries to, let's say, at least have the root name server information that is already in existence away from national control. And the Chinese did not only apply for its own root name server, they also applied to have it inside their ministry for, I think it's Ministry for Information officially is the name or so, where they have this internet filtering capacities. And so this might be, or the idea seemed to have been that they wanted the domain name system used direct for censorship, or how we call their so-called religious sensitiveness for special symbols. ICANN's process is, and there you have a point, is completely too slow. That's because so many people are angry about ICANN that ICANN fears most of the time about being sued. That seems to be an American feeling. I don't know if you get that with a green peel with your kids or whatever. Meaning the ICANN lawyers take lots of attention, for example, on this contract to extend the top-level domain system. And even those who were selected by ICANN to have a new top-level domain needed, I guess, something like 9 months now to have their contracts. So that's just because ICANN is over-bureaucratized. And the directors, for example, are not paid for their work. So it means part of it is volunteer work. I'm not paid for it at all. I just get my air travel tickets paid for them. And that means, of course, I can't spend 24 hours a day as other directors cannot to get this procedure improving. The staff is paid by it, and so the staff has more power, but the staff is more or less completely in the United States. So that's not really an answer. That's just trying an explanation of the situation.
We're under the 5-minute mark, so please line up there and
how would you define your role at the moment in ICANN? Are you happy with your role there?
Let's say like this. I mean, when I was elected, of course, I wasn't so naive to think I could change the world just by being sitting there and having a little bit different ideas on realizing of trademarks and so on. But I mean, of course, it gives me the ability to learn not only what's happening there, but also to give people like you guys here a picture of what's happening there and to find alternatives. So I'm not very much sure that ICANN can be turned in an institution that's really based on its own approach. That, I mean, it wants to be consensual handling the issues in the name of the internet users. Of course, it does not do that, and I'm not sure it can ever do that. But I think it's very important because the domain name system is, by I think, a large percentage of the internet users is not really realized. They all think that the internet is something decentral and anarchic taking place, and they don't mention that the DNS system is completely centralistic and authoritative. And so I think it's important to have more people seeing this. And there I can do something, and also what I can do a little bit is, as in, let's say, politicians in the opposition of the mainstream there, to improve some procedures to have more people participating and seeing what's going on. So.
Andy, you weren't only elected, you were elected by a landslide. You had more votes than, except for one other person in Japan, you had more votes than anybody who was running in that election. What do you think that means? How did that happen? Does that reflect people's sentiments?
I mean, that's of course, let's say like this, people didn't want it, anyone sitting on the board would just say yes to all that shit and just be playing the game like they play it. So, I mean, of course, it was a very nice picture for me that also, I mean, I'm around for some time doing this and get that work in the creators context, and of course, it was a good sign of people, but of course, with so many votes, I also have to handle, let's say, expectations. And it's a little bit hard to fulfill expectations if you don't have that really ability to do that 24 hours. And if you still then go there and make a suggestion, of course, you have the borders of the lawyers and all those and giving you stones in the way all the time. So in a way, it's a good feeling and it's work to do, but I would think send out a little warning that please don't expect ICANN to change now into the hacker-compatible info-freedom space institution because I'm just one of 18 there. So.
Maybe if you had a staff of volunteers that helped you.
Yeah, sure.
More, so feel free, folks. One more question, last question. No, we're out of here.
I'm Henrik. I'm a question for Emil Gonstein. There is currently discussion that .us, which is now very strictly regulated with states and county levels, will be going free on the second level. There are very strange rules made now that they would give one company the control of both the registry and the registrar functions. Is there already any action in the US from people, grassroots, that there is something happening here? I only have seen one academic paper yet.
There's surprisingly little interest in .us in the US, believe it or not, because we think that the whole internet, like everything else, revolves around us, and that everybody else is the funny two-letter, postscripts that come after the domain name. Among the people that I know, and among the people that seem to take pleasure in designing the net, we feel that the only fair way is to have a .us after every name, so that we can play on a fair playing ground with the rest of the world and not dominate the internet and hence destroy it. But Andy probably knows more as far as technically, what is in the works as far as .us.
I mean, the .us, normally we have still .mil, we have .edu and so on, and we have lots of domains which historically were coming from the situation where there was only the United States computer connected to the so-called internet or whatever. And so normally .edu, for example, which is only open for American educational institutions, would have to go to .us because that's the CCTLD. I see the Time Master being a little angry on us already. So to the other question you raised about registry registrar functionality, that's the networksolutions.com story. That has a lot to do with their ways on, let's say, abusing their monopolistic situation as far as they can. But I guess we will need another session for that. And we can do it right now.